Go.
Community composting program, we turned around, made compost tea with that, and then went out and did treatments to edible landscapes of folks who had suffered losses in the Thomas Fire. So that was a successful program. And thanks very much to both the Ojai Women's Fund for funding that, and to Patagonia for their support for that, because they allowed us to expand that to Ventura.
Wow.
At the moment, it's a little tricky with COVID, but we are doing, continuing to do our community compost program. We've got a cycling compost collective in Ojai that goes around and picks up residential compost, because there's a kind of space in the food waste network for residential composting, and we are filling that at the moment until really the communities and have to do that themselves. But we're doing it for residential folks in Ventura and Ojai. We take compost to the Ojai City Demonstration Garden, the OCD garden, and we're making compost and compost tea there for distribution into the community. But today we're going to look at some of the things that I do in terms of what I build. This is a regenerative lifestyle. And there's a little crossover with permaculture design in here. I took my permaculture design course in 1997 with Bill Mollison up at Happy Valley School in Ojai. I was very, very lucky to be able to take that. And it really unified a lot of things that I was involved in before then. And so we'll talk a little bit in terms of permaculture. We'll talk about zone analysis, and that's really paying attention to where you spend your time, because where you spend the majority of time is where you should put things that need a lot of attention. So in my kitchen, my gardening and food production starts right at my kitchen sink, and we'll see if we can get this.
Did you want to show us the books?
Oh, we'll come back to
Okay.
that. We'll start with that, with over here.
I'm going to go over here for the lighting.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So right at my kitchen sink, I'm here multiple times a day, and I sprout. And these sprouts are bulk bin sprouts. And I sprout different things. I got garbanzo beans, I got mung beans, I got kidney beans, I got lentils. And it's very simple to do. Rinse them out daily. It encourages the production of healthy, fresh food that you can't get much fresher than eating a live sprout. And with this family of four, the mung beans are the most popular, I gotta say. And then if they get too big, well, I can plant them out. I've got a whole bunch of beans here that actually are probably a little bit too leggy, and I'm going to plant them out.
Wow.
When it's cold, I have a seed starting mat here, and I can start seeds like I started my pumpkins here with a little heat treatment. It also allows us to make yogurt, and we use the heat here to turn our the milk that we get from our local farmer into yogurt. We also make cheese here, very simple to do. And a point I want to make here is that in terms of food production, really supporting your local farmer is the way to go. If you can get into a CSA program now, and they really are full, I know Steve Sprinkle now has 80 boxes that he gives out each week, and I've been a supporter of CSA for years, but support local farmers. They're very good at growing food. And for me, I can show you a little bit of what I do with food production, which is kind of more hobby style, but still I produce a little bit of stuff here that is increasing the resilience of our household. And really that's one of the main points of the CRA's work, is to be proactive in helping resilient communities develop. We're not reacting to emergencies, we're planning for a community that has food production embedded in it. So
you're planning for a COVID-19 shutdown of...
We were certainly ready in many ways.
Right.
I mean, the work we've done for years with seed saving and seed swaps and giving away seeds at seed swaps. We've done that for years, and now I'm getting a lot of people who are asking me, hey, have you got any seeds? And fortunately I do, so I'm able to help distribute food in the community. Back at the table here, in terms of what I do with food production, one of the things that I really like is my sourdough, and I use this kamut grain, and some of you may have seen Bob Quinn speak at Patagonia a couple of months back, and his book Grain to Grain is one of the most interesting critiques of American agriculture that I've read. I highly recommend it. And for folks who are gluten sensitive, the kamut, which is this ancient Khorasan wheat, is wonderful. And doing the sourdough I highly recommend it. It grounds me. It's my daily bread. It's not that hard to do. And there's something about sourdough. Michael Pollan talks about this in his book Cooked, and that's a great series. If you haven't seen that, it's a wonderful 4-episode series on Netflix, Cooked. But sourdough makes you salivate, and regular store-bought bread doesn't. And there's something about the activation of your enzymatic system that sourdough does that really is key. So I encourage you to check out sourdough production. We do kombucha too, which is really an easy thing to do, a refreshing drink. So in terms of permaculture design, one of the key things about permaculture is we're taking a personal responsibility for earth care, and it is an ethics-based system. So it's not driven just by profit and growth. It's about earth care. And if you are interested in permaculture, well, the Permaculture Designer's Manual is it's the big reference book.
Well-worn book.
There's a lot of information in here. It's been distilled out, I would say, for the homeowner very well in Toby Hemingway's book, Gaia's Garden. And I highly recommend that. So if you read Grain to Grain, great background on industrial ag, and then Gaia's Garden, really a wonderful way to look at permaculture design and understand how you can apply it in your own home. So let's see. So we're in zone 0 here. We're inside the house. We're here multiple times a day. And what we're going to do is we're going to step outside to what they call zone 1. And zone 1 is not a physical location as much as it's a location defined by how much time you spend there. And zone 1 is somewhere where you are multiple times a day. And the easy way to think of that is it's probably right by your kitchen door. So let's go out and see what's out here.
You have your phone, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no clock on right now for me. So, yeah.
All right. So here's my zone 1. And what have I got in my zone 1? Well, I've got sensitive seedlings. I start seedlings, and right now I've got melons coming up. There's quite a lot of squash that are in here. Here's my pumpkins that I started inside that are the cotyledons are pushing up now. I've got some onions coming up here, some chives. But I'm backed up. We need to get more artichokes out there. But because it's hot here, I've got this under shade cloth. I need to be keeping these moist multiple times a day or they'll dry out and die. So I keep them in zone 1. Our dog is being very friendly. I keep them in zone 1. And zone 1 is shaded by shade cloth, but also by passion fruit. And passion fruit, if you need a trellising shade, passion fruit is wonderful. This one is
beautiful,
edible, but it's super drought tolerant, fast growing perennial shade. I'm really impressed with this. Is Passiflora edulus. There are other passion fruits. They have wonderful flowers, of course. So yeah, zone 1. I'm here multiple times a day, and I'm going to actually do this right now because I can see it's a little bit dry. I'm just going to close off my seedlings again. And I've already done this, I think, twice today. The other thing that I've got in my zone 1 is my compost. And I know that Camilla, the compost queen, talked, I think last week.
A couple of weeks
ago about composting. And for me, this is one of those nature-based climate solutions. If you are composting your food waste, you are a solutionary. You're part of the solution. And composting food waste is not that hard. What we need to do is to balance out the nitrogen that you have in your food waste with a carbon source. And so the carbon source that I use, tucked back in here, is wood chips. And so I use a mulch, and I didn't want to go through the whole demo, but I use I'll put the food waste in here, and then I'll cover it in wood chips. You could use straw too. Most of us
straw instead of the wood chips.
You could use that instead as another carbon source. You could actually use cardboard. And if you rip up cardboard, and we all get cardboard delivered to our houses, if you rip up cardboard and soak it, especially the soaking for like a day or 2 days even, then what happens is you get bacterial growth on that, and worms love that. It's like an adventure playground for worms. So if we did dig through this, we'd find that there are a lot of worms in this. I have a kind of rotation of my bins here. I'm not trying to build thermal compost. I'm not building a huge amount of compost at one time to get hot. This is about vermicomposting. This is about being processed by worms. And so by moving the bins around, the worms will follow the fresh food. And what we end up with is finished compost with some sprouts in it.
Nice.
There's always volunteerism in my compost. And then I'll take this and give it a little sieve. We're very civilized here. And then I've got compost that I can use in my garden.
We have a question. It says you can't put things that have, and it's MOMDED in compost, right? Maybe this person can spell the word. I'm not sure what that means.
I used to not put, for instance, citrus rinds. I didn't put onions in there. I wouldn't put avocado pits. But everything does break down after a while. And what I find when I sieve it is that there'll be things in there that haven't broken down, and they go back into the compost for another chance.
The question is you can't put things that have mold on them in the compost, right?
I put pretty much anything in compost, but if it was a diseased plant, for instance, if you have an apple tree that has fire blight, then I would not be composting that except in a very hot pile. So, diseased plants, maybe you want to avoid that. Folks say don't put meat in your compost. I very rarely have spare meat.
That's
and I've
gross.
got animals that eat it. We had fish last night from our fishermen, and
I bet that
went down really well.
Yeah, I bet.
So composting, we've got greens from the kitchen, we've got browns from. This came from Ojai Valley Organics, and one of the things in Ojai that we're really missing is our mulch source. Now, Ojai Valley Organics closed, and the county is preventing reopening because they've got stringent requirements for the CUP for that site. And so if you can call your supervisor and say, hey, reopen Ojai Valley Organics, it's really important for the health of our citrus orchards, for the health of our community, is to have a source where we can take our brush and get it turned into mulch.
Do you put your coffee grounds in your compost?
I do, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That was one of the questions.
Yeah, I compost most things, and the thing that I'm trained as a cell biologist, so I look at the compost and compost tea that we're going to have a little peek at here under the microscope. So I'm looking for a diverse soil food web in there, particularly fungal hyphae, and the wood chips help that because fungi eat wood chips. So I like to use wood chips to encourage, and there's only a brief amount of time here to talk about this, but perennials like fungally dominated soil. 30% of your carbon in your soil is in the form of the body of fungi for the fungal mycelium. So really mulching, covering soil with wood chips is a key thing you can do for the health of your perennials. So I do have a compost tea brew going out here. If we pass I love this tree. This is Pakistani mulberry, and this one is not quite fruiting yet, but the one at the back is. And I'd highly recommend I don't visit this more than once a day. So this is in zone 2 in permaculture design, but they're drought tolerant, delicious fruit in
It's a lot of fruit.
They're high quality, high protein. Great.
I did not know that.
I love them. So out here I've got where I brew compost tea, and we do this both through the nonprofit, and I also do this as a business with landscapers. And I've got these cone tanks where I brew up to 70 gallons in this one, 50 gallons in this one. And folks are saying, well, what about something smaller scale? And so this is a 5-gallon compost tea brewer. And what we make is an actively aerated compost tea. So there's a little air pump and it's continually recycling the water. So, and I add foods to it. And the foods that I add,
Wow.
a basic one is humic acid. And humate, you can actually produce humic acid from your own compost by dribbling small amounts of water through compost, and the brown liquid you'll get out of it will have humates in it. Humification is what fungi in particular will do to wood chips to turn it into soil. And so humic acid is really a plant food. So I put that in to help the fungi, the bacteria, the nematodes, the protozoa to grow, the microarthropods that are in there to grow.
Tell us the two places again that were where you distribute this to. What were the two?
So that we do this for community programs through Center for Regenerative Agriculture. So we have a site in Ventura, Rincon, Vitola, and Secretary. Shout out to Jan and Ron for their work. And we also do produce this here at the Ojai City Demonstration Garden. And then I have a business, I sell it to landscapers. So if you're buying it privately, then it would be through the business. If you're involved in a community garden, a school garden,
Got it.
Street tree plantings, anything like that, we'll support it through the nonprofit.
Perfect.
And so I'm going to turn the pump off, and the other food I put in here
So cool.
is
I'm going to get out of your way.
seaweed. So kelp extract, and this is a great plant food. I do sometimes also put in whole fish and organic liquid fish, but this one
Wow.
I made vegan, so it's got kelp and it's
That's
got humate in it.
thoughtful.
So, and then I'll take this, and I just want to show you the apparatus if I can. It's got quite a bit of PVC,
Nice.
which I'm not super excited about. PVC, the most toxic plastic, but it recirculates and makes a little waterfall. I had this running for about 16 hours. And
Just this batch.
yes. And so I am, and it's not something that's shelf stable because this has got active biology in it. You can't
Right.
store it.
Right.
And so it's best used, fresh. But this allows me to take a very small amount of compost, less than it was like a cup and a half of compost, and make 5 gallons of compost tea, which I can then dilute to 10 gallons and use to water my plants. So this one's going to go to a customer around the corner. But
That's awesome.
that to me is spreading and expanding the ability of your compost production to actually really make an effect on your landscape. And the important thing to realize, it's all about the biology. And we've become so inured to thinking of plants in terms of chemicals, their nitrogen needs, and sure, you can analyze plants like that and you can feed them chemicals, but there's a whole host of problems with that. What we want is soil that looks like black cottage cheese, and it has particles that have air spaces in between them. One of the ways you can test the fertility of your soil is just to pour water on it and see how quickly that water infiltrates. And if it goes in and disappears very quickly, you've got healthy soil because you've got air spaces in it. If it sits on the top, you've probably got fairly compacted, unhealthy soil there. So the other thing I wanted to do, as we 20 minutes now, so we've got another 10 minutes and then we can do more, is to show you a couple of things that I've got going here that I think are kind of fun elements of edible landscape that's not too hard to do.
Well, we don't have too many questions yet, so you can just keep going.
Okay, I can ramble on.
You can.
For one of the questions I get is from renters, and okay, I can't plant fruit trees. I need to move. What can I do? Well, you can do things in pots, and so loquats are one of the plants that you can, a perennial fruit tree you can grow in a pot in these 15-gallon pots. Mulberries too, I've had success with growing those in pots. But strawberries you can grow in pots, you can move them around. I can take these and move them into the sun or the shade. And they go very well. A companion plant that goes with strawberries is borage. And so I'm providing some insectary support. The bees really like the borage. I've got chard in pots. And chard is so easy to grow. It grows just with available rain. Allow it to set seed. I've got chard growing all over the property here just because it sows itself. I've got kale in pots supported by fava beans, nitrogen fixing. We've got to think about,
wow.
you know, when I talk about nitrogen fixing plants, above every acre of land on the earth, there's 35,000 tons of nitrogen freely available if you have nitrifying bacteria in the roots of plants, and nitrogen fixing plants do that. So peas, beans, vetch, all of those. Here's my snap peas. Those are nitrogen fixers. You can eat them, and they're increasing the fertility of your soil.
Is this information in that book, Gaia's Garden?
Yeah,
oh,
I'm
thank
sure
you.
A lot of that's in there. Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, holy moly.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. But yeah, kale, I love it. Grow it in pots, simple. But you know, if you had very limited space, and you were saying, well, I don't have space to grow fruit. All I've got is a tiny patio or a windowsill. Well, you can grow mint. Everybody can grow mint in a pot. And the simplest recipe is heat water, take mint, put it in the water, and you've got mint tea, which is a refreshing herbal tea.
We have a question.
Yeah.
One thing I've had a past landlord say was that they didn't want to compost because they were afraid of it attracting pests.
Yes. Yeah,
Do you find it attracts animals?
So, yes, it can attract. I have in fact had my compost piles turned by bears, and yeah, the rodent thing is an issue. So you can get tumblers which are off the ground, and those are completely rodent proof. Looking for bins that are rodent proof is that's something that a fixed bin will do. I have cats here, and they really do a good job with rodent control. It attracts beneficial life too. I have salamanders in my compost. I have frogs in my compost, and that is a good sign because frogs breathe through their skin and they're really susceptible to chemicals in the landscape.
And so, we have another question. Where can the coffee grounds be effectively used?
You know, I would put them on into the compost pile. But you could spread them around plants. You can do that too.
Okay.
You know.
And are legumes nitrogen rich?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
They are. So, and they're nitrogen fixers. And the key thing about legumes is that it's the nitrogen fixing bacteria live in the roots. And so when you plant them, it's ideal to have an inoculant of the nitrifying bacteria. You can buy that very inexpensively. My local supplier is Island Seed and Feed. Shout out to Matt Buckmaster up there. He provides me with a lot of the seed and support that I use. So yeah, nitrifying bacteria, when you pull the roots out of a fava bean, for instance, you should see little nodules when you cut open the nodule, and it should be red. And that's the nitrifying bacteria. If you have nodules and they're white, you haven't got enough bacteria. Soils usually have some of that bacteria in them, but inoculant will make sure you do.
Okay, there's a lot of information.
So it is a lot of information. If you only are growing, what can you grow that's going to make a difference is, to me, it's herbs to make tea. And one of my favorites is this one is lemon verbena.
Oh,
and
that's
it's
wonderful.
My favorite plant to smell. I just love it. And you know,
I'll smell it from 6 feet away.
Yeah, yeah. and you know, this in hot water is a delightful tea. I use it to flavor my kombucha too, and so lemon verbena, mint, rosemary, a simple thing to grow. You can grow it in pots. Provides support for beneficial insects, and it's
beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Let's have a wander here and see what we find. I've got certain things nursery.
Your ducks are... Did we lose your ducks?
Oh yeah, ducks.
Let's go back.
Oh yeah.
Do you have time? Let's go back.
Okay. So the animals in the landscape. It's really interesting to have animals to process and produce nutrient-dense food. And for instance, I live on a citrus ranch, but we have experimented with moving ducks around. We did it with geese. And ducks are better. The ducks crimp grasses, they don't scratch, they eat, particularly they love snails, and they produce great eggs. We actually have, we're hoping that we've got ducklings coming. They're hiding over there. I have this movable electric fence, but I also have guardian livestock dogs. And because we're right on the edge of national forest, we have wildlife that come here. But that's we also have rabbits, but they are not generally free on the landscape. But we have eaten our rabbits, and we've got breeding going on. So that sort of takes you to another level. It depends how involved you want to get. But rabbits know how to breed, and they're delicious. What can I say?
So I have a question,
Yeah.
or there is a question. Do you know if there's someone that comes to homes, like for a consultation?
I do that. Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. You can contact me, and I can come out and do consults on that. So that, multiple functions from a single element is another permaculture term. And here I've got shade production from a food tree. So this is primarily about shade, and this is mulberry, which can be a little bit messy.
Did you plant all these?
Yeah.
So you've been here for 20 years?
Yeah, this one was in a pot though. And this was in a pot for years and
Wow.
produced in a 15-gallon pot. So that's why I say that mulberries are a good potted perennial. But I want to show you particularly over here. There's a saying, friends don't let friends plant annuals. But if you are going to plant annuals, the annuals I recommend are annuals that will self-sow. And the easiest one is arugula. And I've got like all of that white stuff under there is arugula.
Wow.
All of this white flower here is arugula. And you can see we've got honeybees visiting it right
Beautiful.
now. And so as I'm walking around the landscape, I'm snacking on fresh arugula. The arugula flowers are delicious. When it's small, and I've got some small leaf arugula in a pot up there, it's great. And then it gets a little bit bitter, and then when it sets flower, delicious again. Self-sows. I'm just going to let this go to seed. I collect a lot of seed, and it's really important that we save seed and collect seed and share seed. Calendula too, simple. You can use the petals in salads. Sows itself. It's beautiful. No additional water. None of this is getting watered. All support for insectary support for beneficial insects. And then the other one that I really like that we've got here is borage. And again, none of this is being watered just by rain. But when you look above it, I've got other layers here. So this is like the ground cover layer, but then above it I've got figs. And then I've got a fig tree that's grown in underneath a mulberry. So I've got 1, 2, 3 layers, and then growing up into the fig and through the mulberry is a grape. So I've got a vertical vining layer. And I also have had some mushrooms here, so I've got a ground layer too.
It's perfect.
So, you can have multiple layers in a very small space. So look for vertical space and how you can use that. Let's see what we got around the back. We're on a citrus ranch. I don't encourage people to plant citrus now because of Asian citrus psyllid, but if you have, one of each type of, if you have space for it, you could have as many as one of each type of citrus. But kishu, tangerines are small. Kumquats you can grow in pots. So those are citrus that you might want to use. Here, under the shade of our mulberry. Nice in the shade.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then
pretty warm out.
Come on around the back.
Camilla wants you to plug your website, ohicra.org.
Thanks, Camilla. Yeah, check it out. It's got descriptions of what we do. And Camilla, the queen of compost, she's paying attention. Thanks.
She is.
So back here, self-sowing annuals again. We weeded out grasses, but particularly chard. Here I've got chard coming out. I've got more chard than I could really eat. I could,
And this is self-sowing.
Self-sowing. All of this self-sowed.
Wonderful.
And then I've got my perennial over soy. I've got more mulberries.
Do you harvest the fruit?
I do. And so you can see I've got sheets underneath, and they fall down on the. The children harvest them.
That's
mainly.
awesome.
But you go to Whole Foods and it's $20 a pound.
Well, that one in the front is huge.
Yeah.
And so you just wait for the fruit to drop?
Yeah, or you can just come and pick it. And we had a sort of burst of ripeness with the hot weather, and there'll be more and more and more.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
This person lives near the beach. They rent, and they have tons of succulents. Can they plant veggies among the succulents?
In terms of succulents, I'm glad that came up, because aloe vera is a really easy thing to go. It's drought tolerant, it's succulent, and you can fillet those and then blend them 50-50 with water and a little lemon juice. It's delicious, high quality food. You sure can interplant with succulents, sure. There's nothing that's going to be negative about that. And really, more diversity of plants is a good thing.
The hollyhock.
Yeah, so
It's gorgeous.
I love hollyhocks.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Carbon fixation is happening here. Look, and it makes these great poles. You can actually make tea out of the flowers.
It's like 10 feet tall.
Yeah, and this one, I did have the ducks out here. I moved the ducks around the landscape, and so this did have some duck poo, but they are pretty vigorous.
Gorgeous.
And then the last part here, as we're at half an hour, is raised beds.
Right.
And when people think about home gardening, they often think about raised beds. And I've done a lot of raised bed gardening at schools. I worked in with the Ojai Unified School District through Food for Thought Ojai, an awesome organization, and lots of raised beds. But they're a lot of work. But they do have wire underneath them, hardware cloth, 1/2-inch hardware cloth, so it keeps gophers out. But we've got some annual food production here, as well as some perennial artichokes cooking in there. But cilantro is an easy one to grow. It's an insectary support. It's delicious. You can eat the flowers, eat it when it's going to seed. There's no worry about that. And I got some kale in here. We got some strawberries, but a lot of work. If you can just have things growing wild, in many ways, I think that's better. But I've got some perennials out here. We haven't gardened here too much, but funnily enough, this year I've got a lot more help in my garden because the kids are here. My partner's here, so
that's great.
I've got a lot of gardening going on. Anyway, let's come do a full circle, and we'll go back into the shade and see if there's any more questions or what else I can show you. I've got my notes, so I can have a look and see if there's anything I didn't cover.
Okay.
But I know. As we're under the shade of our oak tree, one of the things that we have to think about is think about the native people here. And the Chumash lived in this area at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years! What a tremendous resource they are for understanding our knowledge of native plants. And native plants, really, native foundation is what I say that we should be looking at. And if you think about what we've lost in the last 100 years here, we've lost biodiversity, we've lost biomass, and we've lost accumulated soil organic matter. Those are the three biggies. And so, mulching, that's bringing back soil organic matter. But if you think about where you live and what it was like 150 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, there were a lot more trees. So that any effort that you can put into planting trees is really key. And one of the other things I do is I run a watershed education program through the Ventura Land Trust, and thumbs up to those guys. Ventura Land Trust is just awesome to work with. And we do tree planting programs with kids.
And that's Once Upon a Watershed?
OnceuponAWatershed.org. And so we're actually developing nurseries at schools that can support native plant production, so we can be planting those out on the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy or the Ventura Land Trust properties.
Wow.
And so thinking about what you can do to plant trees, nitrogen fixing trees, how about that? They're bringing fertility into your soil. They're usually fast growing, and they're giving you shade. And it tends to be here that shade is desirable. And a lot of things will grow in dappled light underneath shade trees. We did a great experiment with growing avocados underneath nitrogen fixing trees, and in that heat wave that we had a couple of years back, the trees that were growing underneath those nitrogen fixing trees were buffered by the trees, and they have fruit production, whereas the ones who were out with no protection, crisps.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So native foundation. I'm very glad that we have some oak trees here. All right, let's see if we can stagger down here past. What else have we got perennial here? Oh, hollyhocks all over the place. Look out for the skeletons. This pineapple guava, the feijoa, is a really nice one. It's drought tolerant, super vigorous.
I'm gonna die.
Come on down.
Hang on. You're gonna have to wait. Okay.
Here we go.
Back.
So, the only other thing I guess I would mention is pests. And a big pest for me around here is gophers. And I trap gophers. You can exclude them like we did with that raised bed with hardware cloth. You can plant artichokes, for instance. Gophers love them. Plant them in baskets. Figs. If you plant a fig tree, plant it in a basket. And gophers will come out and run across the top of the ground. So you have to have your basket be up, so that they will eat fig trees, and it's really frustrating to have planted a fig, tended it for a couple of years, and then come in and a gopher has killed it.
Yeah.
And I recommend the cinch traps for trapping gophers. There's a lot of different traps. I've tried them all, and the cinch trap is the easiest for me, but you got to wear heavy gloves when you're learning about using them. You can get them on Amazon. Use the smallest ones for moles. That's my tip there.
Smallest ones, meaning
the cinch traps come in variety of sizes, and the ones that I use are most effective are actually designed for moles.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Does anybody have any questions? No more questions?
So if you are interested in a consult, go to the website ohiCRA.org. You can contact me, David at ohiCRA.org, and especially in the Ojai Valley, I also make compost tea and deliver that. But we have community composting program at the Ojai City Demonstration Garden. We're doing the pickup on Sundays by electric bicycle. So we're really trying to be regenerative.
That's fantastic.
And it's interesting to visit. I would encourage you to find your local community gardens. School gardens are important. Whether your local school is open, I'm not sure, for access for its gardens, but community gardens, it seems like community gardens are going through a real resurgence at the moment. I went to my local garden center the other day, and they have, I would say, 10 times as many vegetable starts as I've ever seen before.
Wow.
And so people are really understanding that growing some food on your own around your house makes sense. The lumber yard here in town, Ojai Lumber, they said they sold more raised beds in a weekend than they'd done in a year. And so there really is a lot of interest in this becoming a resilient community. And that's what the Transition Town movement was all about. And so if you can look up Transition Town, and there was an effort to make Transition Town Ojai, but people are distracted by dashing around all over the place. Now that we're all in place, maybe we're ready to have approaches to have resilient community. One of the things that's happening and Laura, you've been very good about your physical distancing.
I know.
I really want to use that term, physical distancing, instead of social distancing, because we really need socialization and we need to connect with people about important stuff. And so much of this is now virtual. Physical distancing in person, but no, we don't have to be unfriendly.
Right. Somebody was actually saying that on, sorry, it was my finger on there. Somebody was actually saying that it is from a mental health standpoint, that it's not social distancing, it's physical distancing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is really important, that we maintain and encourage social connection.
So Camilla is saying Victory Gardens?
Yeah, during the Second World War...
Transition Town.
So during the Second World War, we had the Victory Garden movement, and Rose Hayden Smith wrote a book about that. And when we were involved in the Second World War, 40% of our vegetable production was coming from 20 million home gardens. And that was a response that was a reaction to an event, right? So we know that we can do it, and home gardens are a huge thing. There's the population in the 1940s of America was something like 150 million, and now it's 380 million. So there's a lot more garden space. There's a lot more space that we can do doing things that are not just about parking cars. So I would encourage you to look at simple ways that you can use your landscape, and the composting and food waste. If it doesn't work for you, if you can't compost, then look for the community garden that you can do it at. If you've got compost and you want it to go somewhere and you don't know what to do with it, freeze it. If you freeze it with just a little water, then when you get the chance to compost it, it'll have some water in it, and then just put it in and cover it with a carbon source. You could be ripping up your cardboard at the same time to put it in there. So I think that we can all participate, even if we're in lockdown in an apartment block, I'm hoping that there is a community garden that you can find, or a local farmer. My older boy's down in South Pasadena, and he gets a CSA from a local farm down there, and he takes his compost, his frozen compost, to the farm.
The other thing Camilla said is transition town.
Yeah, the transition town movement really respond by the permaculture design, and it is a way of looking at resilient communities. And yeah, I would encourage you to Google it. And it started in Britain. There's been movements throughout the world, transition towns, and some towns really are successful. What's the one? There's one, oh yeah, in England, Todmorden, and which is a funny name, but it's a town, and incredible edible Todmorden. And they have vegetable tourists, people who come because their police station has has food garden. The railway station has a food garden.
Wow.
The fire station has a food garden. And doesn't that make sense?
It's awesome.
Why wouldn't we plant perennial food trees in parks? And often people say, oh, well, homeless people will eat it. Exactly. So,
I know you've got tons of critters around here. I don't see anything that's been, except for, you mentioned the gophers. I don't see anything that's being like ravaged by squirrels or birds or.
Yeah, and we have our animals that do drag in squirrels, and we got a lot of gophers, but I had one beaten up this morning. But yeah, we have losses to birds.
Sure.
But I think
Not
it's okay.
significant.
That's one of the things is if there's losses to insects or birds or something, don't be too worried about it. We don't need to start spraying poisons around. And one thing that I like to talk about is this term weeds. And remember, all plants are fixing carbon into the soil. All plants are nature-based climate solutions. So really, when we talk about weeds, I think you're talking about a seed shortage. And we need to sow more things. If you're taking out plants, then what is it you're replacing it with? Is it mulch? Is it seeds? Is it trees? Let's plant more seeds. We need to have more seeds and less weeds.
Well, we have some people that have joined since you gave the original introduction. Tell us about the seed swapping.
Okay, so we've done this for years, and Patagonia now supports a seed swap in the fall in Ventura. So at the store, Bruce and the team there give us the space in the back courtyard, and there's just a core group of people who have made it a passion to save seed and to distribute it, and it's generally distributed for free, and there's a lot of information that comes from it, appropriate information about how these seeds are grown and what you can do in your own landscape. So we do one, and there's a Santa Barbara seed swap that's just huge. We participated in this year, the Santa Barbara Permaculture Network, Wes and Margie, they've organized that for years, and they had it at the library this year, and when the doors opened, there was a flood of people came in, and this was before COVID. Now I'm just getting a lot of requests for seeds, and I'm trying my best to fulfill them, but I'm not a seed production company, but
right.
Rincon Vitova Insectary has a lot of seeds for beneficial insect habitat. If you go to a bulk seed supplier like Island Seed and Feed, you can get your seeds there. But the most important thing is when you grow something that's successful, save seed. The last thing I saved was ashwagandha, and I'd never grown that before.
Wow.
And it grows really easily around here. But arugula, chard, calendula,
That's
cilantro,
awesome.
simple things to do seed saving from. And seed swaps, look for them. We've done one in Ojai for years with the Ojai Valley Green Coalition and Food for Thought Ojai. And I think the Green Coalition is maybe not able to support that now. I think Food for Thought's going to take the lead. So if we ever get back to having gatherings,
right.
Food for Thought and Center for Regenerative Agriculture will probably do another one in the winter of 2021. So we'll do something in February. And seed swapping that's important stuff.
Well, we have, if I don't mess this up, I'm going to save this and we're going to upload it to our YouTube channel. So we can share that with you and your community. And I think we're good on time, right? Are we good?
We are.
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
45 minutes. How about that?
Thank you so much. Any more questions? Thank you so much. Any more questions? Rincon Vitova is the name of the insectary in Ventura.
Yes.
Insectary.
Yeah.
All right.
The bug farm.
Learned lots of stuff today, David. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming out.
Wrapping up the Earth Month live stream Instagram series. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Is regenerative agriculture ocean friendly?
Yes, I would say it is, in particular because we don't have nitrogen waste going into the ocean. So we don't have those dead zones. If you had regenerative ag, then your soil is keeping all the nutrients in it. You're not getting chemicals washing into the ocean, and you're not getting dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico as we do with our industrial ag.
Great question. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.